Welcome, namaste, shalom alaikum, shalom to all the different people out there in the world with different faiths and in different locations. I am Mathura Das, and I'm broadcasting from the southwest of London. Welcome again. This is my, I think, 15th live share. Shalom alaikum. I have friends in Lahore, very dear friends, just paying my respects to them. It's a very big honor for me to be able to have this window of opportunity in all the madness that's going on in the world and during the lockdown. It's become a kind of it's a new way forward, it seems, in the world for communicating, live shares and Zoom shares, and I've been really enjoying it, and I've have quite a few friends who I think have been enjoying it. And the great thing about technology is it can be recorded and then shared later. I was even looking up dates recently about, we always remember the albums when they were released, like the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's was released on the 1st of June 67. But if you look at when they started recording and when it was ready quite a long time before. And books, they're sometimes kind of written 10 years before and then kind of discovered 10 years later, like On the Road, Jack Kerouac. Anyway, just a little bit of musings about time. In my shares, what I do is I chant 3 Oms. I do some prayers to my lineage. I do a chant and some songs that I've written with prana from the Bindu Babas. And then I have my talk. And the talk has been going on for quite a long time. It's a big, long historical process, but it's moving along quite rapidly now. And I just, in my last shares, which you can access by going to my new page at Between Worlds, all of the shares are there, and it's all listed, timelines, when the video starts and everything like that. Yes, I just got initiated in my last ones, and I've got the name Mathura Das, and now I'm in the process of being active. I'm still only 17 years old, just going on to 18 in Amsterdam. That's going to be the story. So if you're interested, stay for that. And I'm just going to do, just change the key. Oh no, I'm going to do my OMS. Yes, sorry. Yes. It's one of the easiest and best ways of just tuning in to your own spiritual energy, your soul energy, and to the divine, and meditating, if you feel in that mood, of sending that vibration outwards to the world. Om Agyan Timirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swavadantikam Vahang Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskachadi Shatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Go Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Om Hare. So 1 minute. I just needed to get a sip. Okay. So lovely to share every day with all the my lovely friends and people. One forgets how many people one knows. And I'll just have to say something lovely happened today, because the subject matter I'm talking about is now in my journey, has brought me to the journey of when I'm a 17, 18-year-old, a big turning point in my life. I've left all my early life and I've joined the Krishna movement. So it's a lot to do with my involvement, and there's lots of ups and downs with the story. But today, this morning, I actually got a personal phone call from Vishaka Devi, who is the new president at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and I know her quite well, and her husband Yadubara, who've made the wonderful film on Prabhupada, and she was invited to become the president, unfortunately right at the time when all of this has happened. But she very graciously just called me just to say how I was, and did I know that there was a link where I could contact all the different Krishna centers around the world for talks and kirtans and stuff like that. And that's never happened to me ever in my life, for years, getting a call from an Iskcon temple president. So anything can happen in life, anything can change. Processes and institutions and realizations and all sorts of incredible things can happen in time. I felt I woke up today and that made my day. So pranams to Vishaka, and for all of her wonderful service that her and Yadubara have done throughout the years. Some very lovely Krishna devotees. So I think I'm going to do my change the key now. Sorry, there we go. We're going to do a few Radhi Govindas, do a little pastoral introduction, take us into the mood of Vrindavan, the beautiful setting of the forests of Braj, the Jamuna river, bluish, floating with lotus flowers, the Kadamba trees, and a beautiful aroma in the air, the scent and a lovely breeze. And Radha and Krishna and the gopis, they're all going to be having their pastimes, and also the cowherd boys. We could be going to during the day. Krishna's playing with the cowherd boys and tending the cows, and in the morning before going off, Jashoda is decorating him, and he's giving him breakfast with some of the other gopis. Anyway, we're going off into that world for a little bit. That's how we do this. It's how Krishna devotees, through hearing Hari Katha, through hearing about the pastimes, the name and form and the glories of the divine, and through chanting their glories. This is part of the essence of the whole bhakti tradition. Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda 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 Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, 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 Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, 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 Radhe Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, 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 Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, 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 Radhe Radhe Radhe, Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, 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 Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda, Radhe Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, 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 Radhe Govinda, Bolo Radhe Govinda. Bolo Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki la jai, Radharani Maharani ki jai, Vrindavana Dhama ki jai. Haribol. Okay, now I'm going to sing. I think I'm going to sing Life is a Mystery, because it is really, isn't it? I mean, every day I wake up and I go, oh, a new day, right? Oh, right, okay, here we are. That's what's going on. And how, you know, the story that I'm telling you, it's kind of, I'm 63 now, and like it goes back. This time I'm telling it is like I'm 17, and it's like epochs and chapters in our lives, and all the strange, mysterious things that have happened to us and will happen to us. And this is what this song is about. It's what me and Prana wrote. It's got a slight kind of zany feel to it, a slightly kind of gothic mood, and most of our songs have a little bit of humor in it. So it's got a bit of DMT, tryptamine kind of vibe in it as well going on. So life is a mystery. Life is a mystery. Time passes by unseen. It's a miracle that we are here at all. Yet still out of the mud we grow, to rise to our destiny and discover our path, whatever it's gonna be, in a future we can't see. Lost in the ocean of endless choices, haunted by hundreds of millions of voices, just like a guru with loads of Rolls Royces and only one shofar who's reading James Joyce's book on the meaning of life, 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 life. I feel like the hero of 1,000 faces, gifts from the gods, but no shoelaces. Juggle with the jigsaw, filling in the spaces, sorting through worlds of alien races. Wow, wow, what's going on now, 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 now? Life is a mystery. Time passes by unseen. It's a miracle that we are here at all. Bless. All this singing makes the throat dry. It's my new mixed berries with carbonated mineral water. It's my refreshing drink. Well, I hope everyone's in a good mood today. That's all we can hope in life, isn't it? Take each day, life day by day, see how things develop, what's going on. And like I said, my day started really nice with that nice phone call from Vishaka from the manor. You know, though she is not in the manor, there's about 40 devotees apparently in the manor, kind of in isolation together, and many of the devotees are having to learn things that they've never done before apparently. So she's in a house in the village of Radlett nearby. So that's a little bit of news, local news, fresh off the press about the Krishna community in England. And it's interesting because the story I've just been telling a few shares back about when I first went to the manor in the early or late summer of 73, and I met Prabhupada. It was, it was just, they'd only had it a few months. It's a bunch of ex-hippie acid heads who've become monks for the last few years, very pure, devoted, and now in the last few years, the Bhaktivedanta Manor, it's gone through an amazing story, which is to do with you could say, the geopolitical racial story of immigration coming to to England, with a lot of Gujaratis, mostly coming from, not directly from Gujarat, mostly from Africa, and coming their parents, and the community, Asian community has grown substantially in England, and this has really helped the Bhaktivedanta Manor to grow and grow to the point where now, as far as I heard, it's the most popular Hindu temple in the world outside of India. Isn't that incredible? Especially during the time of Janmashtami. Who knows what's going to happen this year? Let's see if everything's, that's a way away in September generally. Okay, it's just a few little thoughts on those things. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to bring us all back to Amsterdam. For those people who have been following and who have come to it, I've left home. I've come to Amsterdam. The community's moved from a very small garage to a very beautiful building on a canal called the Heringgracht, and we moved there in February '74. And the community, when getting that building, it started to expand and expand. And I went from staying in the ashram to being a devotee who's kind of main dominant duty at that time service was traveling in vans and going to different parts of Belgium and Holland and distributing literature as a way of spreading Krishna consciousness and simultaneously raising funds. So that's where I have been in my story. That's what I've been doing around me in the story, because this is what my story is about. It's about me going on a journey, initially inspired by mystical, deep spiritual connection with the chanting of the Maha Mantra, then getting involved with the movement, and then discovering this whole world of a matrix of international social dynamics, with me being localized in Holland, but with and connected with different branches that are gradually being, at this period that we're talking about now, this is like suddenly we've gone from the early 70s into the mid 70s. We've kind of traversed even 74, we've gone into 75 now, and the Krishna movement is spreading and spreading all over. And one of the things just to keep track of the timeline where we are, because in my last share, I was mentioning about this character called Pritu, who is German. He came to Amsterdam after Tulsi Das had left, after being there for a year, and he came in late May or mid-May in 74, and then kind of carried on till January 75 and had to leave. But during this period, I'd been traveling on with the boys, and we used to go out dressed as Hare Krishnas with dhotis on, and we started to sell these records that they had in Germany, and we were it was okay. It was nice. Lots of devotees liked the album, but the whole idea behind selling these albums was to get a contribution, because we thought it'd be easier to sell a record than a book, and with that donation, we would be able to give a piece of literature. That was the idea behind it. And one of the leaders, a very dynamic personality who passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years back, Mahavidya from Italy, he and Rigapati together, they spearheaded the whole traveling Sankirtan, what we call the traveling parties. And Mahavidya, Rigapati was older and from England, and Mahavidya was Italian. Very different types of personalities, but both fascinating characters and great leaders for this project. So Mahavidya went to a meeting in Germany, because Germany was the kind of center of our zone at that time, because Amsterdam was connected with Germany, and there was the GBC, the authority, the hierarchy. Hansaduta was based there, and his team, really, that he'd been training for the last few years. And one of those the devotees was Alanath. And he was one of the most enthusiastic people and involved with this distribution in Germany. Now, together, somehow or other, with Hansaduta, they had come up with this thing that was called a mantra, a sales mantra. And it was specifically designed to stretch the truth, or you could call it a white lie. And there's a different way that you could say it. Many different people have different opinions about this, but I was a part of this right from the beginning, and I can tell you that it was stretching the truth, and it was a bit of a white lie. And I see this as quite important in the expansion of the Krishna movement, because I think that what it did was it kind of tarnished our integrity to a degree. Okay. But okay, I'm going to tell you what happened with this. So Mahavidya came back from Germany from these meetings with this mantra that they'd worked out. And when they came, the devotee who was involved with the Sankirtan, who spoke Dutch and French, was Ranadumada. So we had this meeting. I remember all the Sankirtan devotees, Mahavidya talked about what it was. Not only were we going to use a new sales mantra, but we were actually going to change our whole look. We weren't going to go out as Hare Krishnas. We were going to wear what we called Kami clothes, which really means civilian clothes rather than our devotee clothes. That was quite interesting after ages, and not dressing like hippies like we used to, but looking quite ordinary and straight. So it was that's quite a big thing, actually, changing one's identity to look a bit like that. And so that was what, somehow or other, we got it together. We I don't know. I think we went off and bought these clothes. We were prepared. We went out and we had to get some trousers and shirts and sweaters and jackets and things like that to pretend, or just not pretend that we weren't full on Hare Krishnas. It was a rapid change of kind of face, really, because before, there was this whole big thing about the look of the Hare Krishnas, and I got quite into, even before I was about estranged from the whole thing. But this was almost weirder. It was weirder in a sense, but we did it. And the mantra, what was the mantra? So the mantra was something, and it was, in English, it was, hello, we are here today. We are monks from India, and we're giving out these records to all the nice people in the town. And they're actually going to come out in the shops quite soon, in a few weeks, for so-and-so and so amounts. But we're just asking a small donation to help us with our projects, to helping, we're helping children in India. And we would show the picture, especially the back of the India, that was the, album, and which had pictures of devotees feeding children in India. So you can see that. And so when I say it was a half-lie, because actually Prabhupada actually had set up a trust for funds from Europe and America to go to a fund in Mayapur and Bengal, his private fund, that was going to feed children in India. But of course, it wasn't all going there, was it? It was all going, a lot of it was going for our maintenance and development of our Krishna ashrams wherever we were, because now we had this massive big building on the healing route. We had to pay rent for it. And I will explain the kind of, in these next couple of years, how our temple expanded and grew in terms of a temple and a community. And this was, and also to remember that this was going on all over the world in various Krishna centers. And America, it was massive. It was really, really massive. So many Krishna centers now all over different parts of America. Now in different parts of Europe, we've gone down to Italy and Spain and Sweden and Denmark and Australia, and the temples in India and Latin America. And they were growing, and people were joining, and it was all rapidly happening during the expansion process during this period. And one of the things that made it possible economically, it's a big story, this whole thing, economic survival in the community, in the Krishna movement. And what this did, this activity, it allowed what I'm going to do is, it allowed us to expand rapidly, but I'm going to explain to you on the level, from my experience, on the very first day we came from Amsterdam, regularly how we used to travel all the way from Amsterdam. A lot of the time we had better results in Belgium. we considered that Belgian people were kind of more pure-hearted and sympathetic to monks and stuff, but we also used to say that they were a bit more gullible as well, and they were a bit more easy to just get a contribution from than the Dutch. Basically, it was quite radical. You would come to the Dutch border with Belgium in those days. You actually, there wasn't the common market then, and Holland, just right near the border, there's sex shops and everything, and you go over the border into Belgium, and it was all kind of like 10 years, 20 years behind. It was very Catholic and old school, and Holland was kind of modern and kind of liberated in that sense. So just to give you an idea of the location and at that time, this is like, we're talking about 75 now, so late 74 going on to 75, and we went into this town. I was that day, the first day we ever did this, we had our dress on, we had a hat over ourselves because we had our shaved heads. We didn't have our marks on our foreheads. We kind of cleaned those off. And we had these records, we had these bags over our shoulders. Now, many devotees did this for years and years and years, this activity, and they've suffered since then from back problems and muscle, because for hours holding sometimes one bag on one side, one bag on the one bag with records, maybe 25, 30 more, how many records you can carry, and books. Lots of books there. And also at this time, we had a couple of Dutch books. I don't think we had Bhagavad Gita yet, but we had some small other books and English books and magazines. And so we had this mantra written down in Flemish, because we were going to the Flemish speaking part of Belgium. And it was even told that this mantra had a kind of magic power, so that even if you couldn't say it or the people didn't understand it, if you just showed it to the people, it would have that power. That was what was happening. So we got to the village, and there was there was a Mrika party and 3 of us. That was normally 4 people, and it was a typical Belgium town with a kind of the town hall and the little church and the shops and roads going off. And Mrika party just said, "You go down here, you go here, and you go down there, and we'll meet back here at a certain time. We'll have lunch and then move to the next place." So I started, and it wasn't like people stopping people on the streets. It was a whole different thing. We'd actually go to houses now and shops, the actual shops. So I remember the first kind of like shop I went into. I went, "Hello," and I said, and I had this bit of paper. I said, "Guten Tag, wir den Monika kommen zurück von India. Wir geben der Platz to the kinder Mensa for helping the Kinder in India. Can you give a geen bijdrage?" And they would, and I showed it to them, and they just went, "Yeah." And they got the money, and they gave it to me without even thinking about it, really. And I was in a bit in shock, and I said, "Thank you very much." And I gave them a book, and they were like, "Wow, a book as well." And thank you. And many times what would happen is you give a book and the people give another donation, and then you give another book and they would give another donation. It was a bit unusual. And then I went a few, and practically, nearly everywhere I went, I just got results. I'd never had so many results. And I describe what it was like, especially on my first day of trying to sell literature in Holland and stopping people and not being really that into it, and having to get over this thing of rejection. It's one of this service of giving out literature and approaching people, or people saying no, it's you have to get used to it. And here, for the first time, it's almost the percentage of yeses and positive responses is quite significant just by saying this thing and not looking very Krishna, basically. And I'm then I get to a house and a shop, actually, and the whole communication thing wasn't happening. I wasn't saying it properly, or they couldn't understand it. So I just showed them the paper, and they went, "Oh, yeah," and they just took the money out and gave it to me, and I was like, so it went on like that, and so by the time it came for lunch, I'd all my records and my money bag with all these notes, because I was just taking them and just kind of stuffing them in. We all came back to the van, and everybody, I think I had a really special day. The others had been really good, and Regapati had done fantastic because he was one of the best of all. I think he'd even had to come back to the van and go out to get more because he'd done so many. And this was just a small Flemish town. So this is what happened on the very first day, and it just repeated this everywhere we went, this type. So I think in that evening, I remember, I've got vague memories about it. I can't remember details, but it was this kind of, there was this wow factor about the results. And when you've got a service and you're trying to do something, achieve something, even if the means that you're using you've got slight issues with, suddenly you've kind of overlooked that because the results are so significant, which is going to help the ashram with its resources, and it's also going to make it more. You're going to have a better time going out there because you're going to get less rejections and more positive responses. Isn't that, it's not, when you look at that, you just think it's not, that's a pretty weak justification for kind of like taking part in a process where everyone's starting to kind of tarnish their integrity by twisting the truth a little bit. But that is what happened, basically. And so now this activity was happening, started with this approach, was happening all over Europe now, because immediately, as soon as they saw the kind of results, it went up, 3, 4, 500%, I say 100%. I mean, almost overnight, our collections just went up, the amount that we could sell and distribute. So, I mean, and then it's all over the world. And in America, when they weren't doing records so much, in later on they started to go to airports, and Tripurari and Pragosh and other devotees who were the leaders were training up all these devotees. And like I mentioned before, unfortunately, even though they got rid of lots of books and money, a lot of the time it gave a negative impression about the Krishna devotees, and sometimes there were bins in the airports just full of books and things like that. But Iskcon, and of course, when Prabhupada heard about how many books were being distributed, they weren't really telling him how we were doing it and what we were saying, but he was hearing these results. He was very excited because that's what he wanted. He wanted the literature to go out and the message of Krishna to go out. And while this had been going on, more and more volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam had been translated and printed. There was many more devotees there available to do that. And not only that, behind the scenes leading up to in this time, Prabhupada spent most of his spare time translating. He was working on Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Chaitanya Charitamrita is the most famous, well-known hagiography that dealing with the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, written after his departure. He lived from 1486 to 1533, and then there were the six Goswamis, and then the next generation were, one of the main leading people was called Krishnadas Kaviraj, and he lived to a very ripe old age, and he got the title Kaviraj, great poet. Kavi means poet, Raj means king, because he'd written an exquisite series of books called the Govinda Lilamrita, dealing with the esoteric Ashtakal Leela of Radha and Krishna, the eightfold sections of the day, the prahars, which Krishna's Nitya Leela goes on, and is the foundation of the meditation for very advanced Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So he'd got this title, and then there had been another biography written by Vrindavan Das Thakur earlier called the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and that concentrated on the earlier life of Sri Chaitanya. But Chaitanya moved to Puri, and he traveled all around India, and he went to holy places. He met different teachers of different lineages, and it's recorded in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and what happened, what was going on at the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's a very important book for being Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and it was one of the main projects that Prabhupada wanted to complete before he departed from the world, because while this is all going on, he's getting older and older. He's approaching 80 now. At this time, he's well into his 70s, and the level, like I said, the matrix of the Krishna movement has become so complex, and he's had to delegate all this kind of management, and not just the management, but to inspire people to become spiritual teachers, and then having to kind of oversee all of the complexities of what was going on in the world, because already certain managers, already one of the top managers in Los Angeles just around this time left, called Karanda. And that was a big shock. I know it was to Tulsidas, because he was his kind of hero and role model. He did reappear years later in Iskcon in Bombay, but it shocked people. Leaders were, and then in America there was a kind of a bit of a thing with Bali Madan, and people who had been considered great authorities and teachers were kind of, strange things were happening, and it was a cause of concern for Prabhupada. He realized that the kind of the movement that he had started and instigated was a very complex thing to look after, and it had a life of its own. And Prabhupada could only kind of look over after some of the aspects of it, because it was all being managed by different devotees around the world. Okay, so the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that was going on behind the scenes, and it hadn't quite been published. We'd had one little advanced book called Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features, which I absolutely loved, and it's about the famous meeting in Varanasi with Prakashananda Saraswati, and who was one of the leaders of some sannyasis who were the followers of Shankara, and who were kind of opposed theologically to the teachings of Chaitanya and the Vaishnava school. Anyway, that was in that book, and so I was reading that, and we knew that the big book was about to come. So I thought I'd explain to that. That was the situation. Now, into this situation, I explained that Hansadutta Amsterdam had suddenly kind of gone away from being controlled by Germany and Hansadutta, and come under the jurisdiction of Bhagavan zone. Bhagavan was this American devotee from New York area, and who'd been a manager in Detroit, and then come to France and been managing very successfully in France, and he was the GBC of South Europe. And so we'd gone from being with the North European GBC to the South European GBC, Bhagavan, and we had this period after Prithu left with Hare Krishnadas for a couple of months, and which was really great with Puranjan. And I said my mother visited at that time, and then Bhagavan brought one of his managers from Paris, Lochananda. And Lochananda was kind of installed around the summer of 75 as the president of Amsterdam. And it was incredible period now, this period from 75 going to be to 77, while Lochananda was the president. That, you know, when some people look back in their life and they say, hey, those were the best years of my life, you know, when I was there or whatever. In terms of my kind of Iskcon career and journey, those 2 years were kind of glorious. For me, there was hardly any kind of problems or anxieties. And it was the time when the community was really expanding, but it was very tight, and it was a very close community, and it was very cohesive. We didn't have schisms or anything like this at this time. And we had once a reunion with lots of devotees in this lovely place that they have now down in Belgium called Raghunath. And during the kind of all the older devotees were recollecting their stories, and Astashaki and Nikunja Vasi, Astashaki was speaking, and Astashaki got married to Hare Krishnas. Now, there was a story behind why she, Ramadevi, and Salendria, these very talented ladies, left and came to Amsterdam, and it added a lot to the community. And I was interested, and their story, they explained that there'd been a kind of it was a bit of they had a kind of schism problem in the temple in London, and it was related to the kind of extreme of brahmacharis led by Prabhu Vishnu and Madhavananda, who was a grihasta, and it was about the power play between kind of some of the quite fanatical celibate monks could be quite fanatical, and it all, you know, the whole. That confrontation, I think, had to be kind of reconciled by Prabhupada. It became so much. But what I wanted to know was I asked them in the reunion in Belgium when they were talking, I said, what was the atmosphere like when you left London and came to Amsterdam? Was there a similar kind of sexy kind of atmosphere there? And they said, no, absolutely not. And that's what was lovely there. Because I thought, I never really, you know, I was a single brahmachari, but the females, I never saw that there was some kind of heavy repression or put down of the feminine principle. Everybody was a very kind of harmonious community, and they said no. Amsterdam had this wonderful atmosphere. It didn't have that atmosphere at all, and so and they were. So what was happening was, apart from the as the temple, we were expanding in terms of the levels of books and the amount of funds that we were bringing in. A lot of this was going towards the developing of the temple, and also what was happening was, now during the time when Hare Krishnas was the president, I got my second initiation. And I have to say, Prabhupada wasn't present, and we actually had a recording of Prabhupada chanting the Gayatri mantra. So there was a ceremony, and we heard the mantra, and then we took the sacred thread, and there was a whole system of how you counted the mantra on your fingers, the different Gayatri mantras, and it was to be not spoken. And it really was a kind of quite esoteric, and it was something quite unusual compared with just chanting japa. And we were now meant to chant this 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening at around a certain time. Now, what this also did, this allowed me to be qualified to actually cook in the kitchen for the deities, even though I think I've been cooking on the traveling parties, but to cook for the deities, to touch a flame, you had to have this Gayatri mantra, and to do puja work on the altar. Now, it's quite an elaborate procedure. People don't realize doing puja, but especially on the standards that Prabhupada had. First of all, that time, like I mentioned, we'd had the Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra deities that had been installed by Prabhupada in 74, and there was a singular altar. But then this other 3 altars were ordered from India. I think it was from India, maybe it was Italy, I can't even remember, but I'll have to find out exactly the details from Hare Krishnas or someone. But we had these 3 spaces that were built, archways in the temple that were built by the devotees who were designing the temple. The temple had kind of panels down the side, and then it had these arches, the 3 arches. Now we were going to install, and the deities would be, I think, purchased in India, and they arrived, and that was Gauranga and Nityananda in brass. It may have been Ashtadhatu. I have to find that out as well, which means the 8 different kind of metals together. And because I had Brahmin initiation, I was kind of allowed to even see them before they were actually installed. And we had a special kind of a room attached to the prasadam room where they were. All the memories are flooding back now. And I remember going into the room, and it was breathtaking, actually, to see the form. They were so exquisite, their gestures and their features. For many people, they will who are not connected with the Vaishnava tradition or in different religions, this will be considered totally idolatrous worship and incomprehensible. But this is once you've stepped into the bhakti zone and absorbed the philosophy and siddhanta of Vaishnavism, which and become attracted to the form of God and to the different aspects of God, this kind of mysterious attraction to the form of the deity is revealed, and it's a kind of a relationship that one develops with God. It's very intimate. It's too much for many people. It's just too much. They can't take it on. But it's an incarnation. It's a form of an incarnation of God that incarnates so that we can exchange and develop a relationship with God. It's the form of the murti, which is the Indian name of the vigraha, the form, the murti, the Archa vigraha. So this was coming up, the ceremony, and we had an incredible installation ceremony, and Gour Nitai were there. And so all of this needed a certain amount of devotees, a certain amount of money, because each of the deities, they have to have preparations offered to them in the morning, for breakfast, for lunch, in the afternoon, and the evening. And you know, and they have to be dressed. It's very complex, and Paravida is most probably kind of the most expert person I know. That he did that for years, his service. There are a lot of other devotees. My friend Madan as well loved doing puja work. It was never I never really got attracted to doing it. I tried it a couple of times. It just wasn't my thing. My thing was kirtan. I learned the drum from Kulashekar and different devotees, and I used to love playing the drum or accompanying other devotees in kirtan. That was my main temple service that I liked, and then starting to do cooking. And also at that time, many Kulashekar reappeared or rejuvenated, because now you see Amsterdam was growing. It had a lot of potential. All the rooms, Amsterdam was one of the best places in Europe to preach, and kind of because so many guests were there. And in the summers, there are actually hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Also during this period, 2 devotees were there for quite a while. Started with just Bhakti Jhan and the Battalion Strat, but then his friend Dina Dayal, they were very extraordinarily eccentric and incredible devotees, and they took it upon themselves to do this service in the summer. They would cook a massive pot of kitchery, huge, maybe 50 liters or more. They would have a car. They would drive to near the Vundel Park, and they would just go to the park, and they would give out free kitchery. That was one of their main things. And Bhakti Jhan gave fabulous classes. He was one of the very early devotees from New York, and he had a very good voice and very funny. Like, had that kind of deadpan humor, a kind of the same kind of humor that kind of Achyutananda Swami has, that I would get to hear when I met him in Bombay years later. And I loved, he used to give these classes at the Sunday feast as well to the guests and to the people, and we would have hundreds of people. That was a big thing. And now, because I could cook, I'd been learning how to cook. Following Vimukta Sangha had become kind of one of my main teachers, and he was the head cook during this period, where lots of there had been Manibanda and different people. And also at this period, Malati appeared in Amsterdam with Gunamai, and Malati is one of the very early devotees from San Francisco, and was married to Shyamasundar and had a daughter called Saraswati. And she'd been very, very close to Prabhupada, and incredible cook, and also incredible energy. And mind-boggling. And she actually formed one of the early, in Europe, I think, female traveling parties. And so Gunamai, it was led by Malati and Gunamai, and they occasionally had different women that joined the party. I think maybe even Rukmini Priya was there at that time. I'm not sure if she was on that party. She was also the main activities in that day. There was this emphasis on kind of just going out there and giving out these things, and I had issues about this. It became very dynamic, but kind of almost extremely kind of extrovert and exoteric. But the atmosphere was kind of in the temple was buzzing, because there were so many devotees, and there was this kind of very positive mood. Also around this time, going on into this, somewhere in the middle of all of this period, was Satswarup was going to appear. I think that's a little bit later than 75, and he was secretary to Prabhupada, early devotee. And he'd set up a project in America called the Library Party, and he had a group of very intelligent devotees, Mahabodhi, Kalakanta, Bugaba, later to be Bhakti Tirtha, Ganesham. They were the central core, and they'd been going to America to universities and selling sets of Prabhupada's books, because now especially when the Chaitanya Charitamrita got published, which was just around now, and the other volumes of Bhagavatams, it was a great way of getting these literatures into libraries and universities around the world. So they came to Amsterdam, and that was a very interesting atmosphere with their group. So if we didn't have the facilities, these kind of a level of different types of devotees wouldn't have come to Amsterdam. And so we had a really interesting experience. And Satswarup was the only time I ever really got to know him. He was very kind of humble, a very kind of mellow, non-assertive, the right kind of sannyasi to visit Amsterdam. We didn't really need any other type staying through. So what actually was, for me, what was a big kind of development in my Krishna consciousness was the arrival one day of the complete Chaitanya Charitamrita series in boxes, and they had arrived at the airport from Los Angeles, because now the big center for the BBT printing and everything had gone to Los Angeles. Now, leading up to this printing of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it was one of the biggest kind of collective epic group efforts that Iskcon ever did, and Prabhupada had actually made an edict, and he said, you've got to finish all of these books, within a certain time. And he just really wanted these books to come, because he wanted to start this knowledge and this information to make sure that before he departed, it was well established amongst the Krishna devotees. And loads of devotees had gone to Los Angeles. If anybody had any kind of artistic ability, painters, they all went there. And in those days, the computers weren't there. I think everything was typeset. And Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's got Bengali script, not Devanagari, that's used for Sanskrit, the transliterations, the word for word, the transliteration, and the translation, and then a purport. And while Prabhupada had been when Prabhupada would translate, he would do it through a dictaphone. He wouldn't be writing, and then the dictaphone would be transcribed. But he had certain literatures for when he was doing Bhagavat, and certain literatures for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And his guru, Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, have both written quite extensive commentaries on this literature. So he would have these literatures there, and while he would be translating. And so sometimes the verses, the reason that there were so many volumes is because of all the transliterations, the translations, the purport. The actual kind of verses, if you took just the verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and wouldn't produce such a volume. And each one of them, Prabhupada, one of the great things about all the Iskcon books that made them very attractive and attracted lots of people to Krishna were the paintings, the illustrations. Prabhupada called them windows into the spiritual world. And because there was this marathon to get everything completed, some of the pictures were completed by a whole group of devotees. One devotee would do this, another devotee would come in, and they worked very, very hard and pulled it off. And Prabhupada was ecstatic. And I think, all the devotees that were involved must have had an incredible experience being part of that. And us, the other devotees who've been out on Sankirtan selling the books and everything, and suddenly these books arrived in Amsterdam. And I remember devotee went and picked them up. A couple of devotees put them in the van, came to the temple, up the stairs into the front room, these cardboard boxes. We all kind of went to them, and it was like Christmas, really. It was a unique experience. One never experienced anything like it before or after. And they all had these golden covers, and we went through, and then we found out volume 1, volume Adi Leela. There was two. The Chaitanya Charitamrita was divided into 3 sections: Adi Leela, Madhyam Leela, Antya Leela. And the Adi Leela means first, it means early, it means the early stories about Chaitanya's life. The Madhya is the middle section, and the Antya is the final stories of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And like I said, I'd read Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which was a synopsis of his life, and I'd read this one book that was one section from this book, a kind of advanced preview of what was going to happen in the middle part of the story. And we went through, and we just sit there opening the different books and looking at the pictures and going, wow, look at this, and calling other devotees over and showing the different pictures. And it was all very exciting. Because I was an artist and a musician, and so Krishna consciousness, and I got very excited and enlivened by various types of musical expressions of Krishna consciousness and artistic. This is what kind of excited me, and the philosophy as well. And I immediately thought, that's it. I'm going to start right from the beginning. And the first volume is quite a thick volume. It's kind of, it's an imposing tome of a book. And now, my journey, if we flip back, one of the crucial parts of my journey involving my journey into spirituality before I discovered Krishna or encountered the Krishna tradition was discovering just books in general. And that started in my 16th year and in 1973. And then these books by Hermann Hesse and different spiritual writers, they completely transformed me, really. And I entered into a spiritual dimension. But since I'd been a devotee living in the ashram, I'd read a bit. And it became a bit of a concern for Prabhupada as well, excuse me, that this emphasis on giving it out and giving it out and giving it out, Prabhupada kind of at a certain time, when he found out that devotees were just spending so much time doing this and not studying the books, he kind of said, this is not good, this is unbalanced, and that caused quite a lot of change around the world in the attitude. I remember that we actually started, it was around the time when Satsvarup and those guys were there, and there was a kind of, okay guys, we've got the book distribution thing sorted out. Now we need to kind of focus on what we are and what we're doing and what's the basis of it. Know what is in the literatures even in depth, especially like the literatures like Bhagavad Gita, the verses, and we'd all become a little bit familiar with the Sanskrit verses. And that was one of the trends. We all started, I remember, especially with Mrigapati, if you were in this party, when we were traveling, we would select a few of the key verses and we'd all sit there and go around. And to this day, some of the only verses that I can remember are still ones that I learned at that time. But the Bhagavatam that Prabhupada had written and translated, at that time, we used to go through it very formally with this one verse a day in the morning. It was quite a formal procedure, read the purport, discuss it, and go slowly through it. But I have to admit, I never really picked up the literature and got lost in it as a piece of literature. I hadn't got lost in it and absorbed like in the way that I had with other books. But then suddenly there's with this Chaitanya Charitamrita arriving, and also the Bhagavatam is in kind of mythological time, if you want to say. It's once upon a time, long, long ago. It's a world that's doesn't exist anymore here on earth. It's this kind of amazing in yugas and times and Krishna's Leela, that few, all about 5,000 years ago at least. Suddenly we're going into a period which is very close. I mean, where I live in Hampton, I can go to Hampton Court Palace, built by Cardinal Wolsey. It's not far different from the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a little bit later. So right near, I'm used to that kind of period in history being kind of quite close to me. Amsterdam, lots of the buildings 300 years old, some of them 400 years old. So Chaitanya Charitamrita is a story about the culture in India and all the persons and people involved with the story of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at that time. And there's a lot of philosophy in it, contained within it, and in the purports. And I couldn't. Once I started, it was like I suddenly got my Krishna conscious fix, really. Okay, all the other stuff I was doing was wonderful, the chants, the association with devotees, cooking, but to suddenly enter into quite a focused way into the story of Chaitanya and Krishna was a kind of something new in this period of mine, and it appeared just at the right time to give me that spiritual strength and understanding of what it was, this tradition that I was connected to, much more details about it. And not only that, at that time, Achyutananda Swami, this American devotee who I've mentioned before, who was singing in our song India album that we were singing, he was one of the foreigners who'd learned Bengali. He'd gone in '67 to escape the draft, and he did these lovely recordings of the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Kedarnath Dutt, Narottam Das, Govinda Das, the Vaishnava Acharyas, and tunes and melodies that were quite traditional that he'd learned in the Gaudiya Math temples, with the tambura, the drone instrument. And it was so suddenly around at this time, I suddenly had the tapes and music I was beginning to listen to a lot were the tapes of Achyutananda. And also, not only that, somebody had recorded some Bangladeshi school children that came with their teacher to Mayapur doing some fantastic Bengali style kirtans, and that recording had come and it had just blown my mind. And I was beginning to get lost. When I would hear and read these books, I would get lost in this world, and that world is Bengal. What is Bengal? Bengal is the Ganges River, lots of rivers, rice paddy fields, green and lush with banana trees, coconut trees, palm trees, sandy paths. It's flat, mud huts with bamboo and thatched roofs. Most probably like most of what Southeast Asia and India used to be like, and lots of the eastern parts of India are like that. It's quite different than Uttar Pradesh. It's the lushness of it all, and not only that, there's the sound of Bengali is a very, very different sound than say Sanskrit even, and Hindi. Hindi is quite nasal, and Bengali is all. My dear friends Madan and Jagannath, they've learned Bengali really, really well, and I haven't learnt it well. And it's lovely to hear the sounds. And I've got dear friends in Calcutta, and I've tried to sing them a song what I thought was Bengali, and they don't understand it. And then they go, "Oh, you mean duh?" And then they would sing it, and I'll go, "Wow." That happened also once when I took my friend Crispian to meet Himanshu Goswami. It's a 14th generation Gaudiya Vaishnava in the East End. And the first time we went there, we met Gauri Chowdhury there, and we're going to have some prasad cooked by his mother. And while we were sitting there, I just said, "Do you know that song, Radha Krishna Pranamo?" And she said, "Oh." And then when she sung it, everybody just kind of like fainted. It was just like incredible. And so this kind of authentic, kind of a more authentic indigenous roots part of the culture, I started to enter into it. And the purports that Prabhupada had to the Chaitanya Charitamrita were also, they were very, very detailed. because as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went all around Bengal, and he had different disciples and different followers, all incredible, had incredible stories, and they established what are called Shripats, places of worship of Chaitanya and Krishna in the villages. This is how Gaudiya Vaishnavism had spread, and so generations from all of these different followers, you could still go there. So Prabhupada would, it would be described, you would have the verse, the description of the person, then it goes, if you take the train from so-and-so station to go there, and then get off and take the bus to go there, you can then meet the, 13th, 14th generation of so-and-so. And I loved all that. I just couldn't get enough. And there was all these books to get lost in. It was just wonderful feeling. In fact, what was unusual was I was the only one really in the temple that was just whoomp, right into these. And so I became, especially when we were like traveling, the devotees would be going, so what's happening? What's the latest? And I'd go, okay, Raghunath Das Goswami has just left home and he's gone off to meet Mahaprabhu in Puri. And I really enjoyed doing all of that. And and specifically that story, the story of Raghunath Das Goswami. My goodness gracious me. Raghunath Das is one of the 6 Goswamis, and he was from one of the wealthiest families in Bengal. Hiranya and Govardhan Majumdar with his father and uncle. And they supported many, many Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and he wanted to join Chaitanya at a very young age, and they wouldn't let him. They would keep hold of him, but he escaped. And he became this incredible renunciate, and of the Goswamis, he was famous for his austerities and his simplicity. And he was in Puri, and then he moved to Radhakund in Vrindavan later. And there's a pastime of him in Puri that was just so kind of outrageously humble and stuff. I started to kind of, it inspired me to kind of like try and push myself to kind of do what the austerities we were doing, not really push myself, but kind of accept them and just think that's nothing compared to Raghunath and what they were doing, So that was a great big thing for me. So at the same time, it was amazing. We had Lochananda coming to the Amsterdam temple, who we had Gour Nitai deities installed, and we had the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was a big kind of like new chapter in the whole story. And one of the things that we had lots of good kirtan singers in the temple, and we even had Viala had come from African American devotee who had come from France, and he was a really good singer, and I got on with Viala really, really well. Hare Krishnas was good singing; he had his style, and Lochananda is somebody, and still to this day, he's a very good role model. Even though he's had heart attacks, he still leads kirtan parties out, and I think he's around his 70s now in New York. And he has a beautiful voice, a kind of a tone that we used to, the Bing Crosby Sinatra crooning voice. It's a very smooth, mellow voice, and he's very good at not just playing harmonium and singing, but also with mridanga, and we became quite good kirtan buddies. Some days, on some amazing days, we would, sometimes go on kirtans in Amsterdam for hours and hours, and we would go off into an amazing zone, and it was wonderful because what we were doing was musically very beautiful as well. So this was for me very important in my spiritual journey, because I was involved with kirtan, was to kind of improve my style, learn more beats on the mridanga, and I learned to do that because Kula Shaker came to Amsterdam, and I learned this very simple beat that he taught me, which is an excellent, Kita ta ti ta ki wa ki ta ti ta Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadna. Anyway, that was the beat that went to the Guru Puja. I loved doing that beat. It was such a cool beat. And this was my way of entering into the kirtan by being participative and also kind of enjoying it very much. I was beginning to identify more and more and more with, okay, what we were doing in Amsterdam was fine, and all the devotees and stuff, but it was this culture in India that was beginning to really, really kind of attract me, and I was dying to go. So in 1970, every year, Tulsidas had gone in 74 to Mayapur. Our beads had been chanted on. He'd come back. Now, every year, this festival will repeat itself at the same time around Gaur Purnima, or what is in India the time of Holi, the full moon during the time of between February and March. It alternates. And it would start in Mayapur, and it will be a way where all of the temple presidents and GBCs and managers and people of different things would come to Mayapur, have all sorts of meetings, deal with that, and then that would be finished, and then the masses of the bulk of the rest of the devotees would come, and then we would have these festivals basically. And so they'd only had this, they had 74, then they had 75 was going to be a big one, because that was the kind of opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, which was a kind of momentous occasion. And then yes, so Lochananda, and they came back, I think, after he came later afterwards. Yeah, some devotees went. That was it. I remember Atmananda, I think, and Mahavidya actually went for the 75 festival. And so that became a tradition that devotees, if it was possible, we started developing enough funds so that it was possible that some of us, and specifically the ones who had raised the funds, could be kind of given it was because we worked so hard. I mean, what we used to do on the streets and collecting funds day out, 5 days a week, it was extraordinary. We were all very young and full of enthusiasm. Most of us were all in our late teens, early 20s, and you had the leader like Mrigapati 10 years older. Mahavidya was only in his mid 20s at that time, and we got this. We were allowed to go, and we were going to go to India. So I'm going to talk about that on my next talk, because this is another big step in my whole journey, is actually going to India for the first time as a kind of reward for being a responsible, good, young Hare Krishna devotee. And it was going to be life-changing, really, and a big step in my journey. So I'm going to talk about that. So there we are. We're in Amsterdam. It's expanding a temple. There's more funds coming in. We have Gour Nitai. We're planning to get Radha Krishna deities as for the altar. This is going to be a big another up coming in the whole story. And also, meanwhile, Prabhupada is going around the world, seeing all the temples, writing letters, giving talks, and also things are starting to get this the seeds of issues that are going to have to be dealt with years later are kind of dwelling at this time, such as school as an education, because as the Krishna movement has been growing and the amount of people becoming, they've been either bringing their young children with them when they joined, or they're being born as Hare Krishna devotees. And it's like the whole question of education has come up. And so some kind of experimental schools, kind of loosely based on some kind of traditional Indian system called Gurukulas, were being established in Dallas. And they were going to be set up starting kind of in Mayapur, and I think they'd already had the seed of them in Bengal with local Bengali boys, and now it was going to be Vrindavan. But there's all sorts of not very good stories going to be connected with this part of the story, but that was part of the story as well. At the same time, other characters in the Krishna movement were developing as the devotees were getting more and more joining. The central devotees, the charismatic GBCs generally, or sannyasis, were developing followings around them. One of the people I should mention at this stage, because I did mention him before, he was in America, but he was most probably one of the greatest heroes to most of the young brahmacharis and devotees in general, was Vishnu Jhan Swami, who was this very charismatic devotee who had, again, incredible voice, unlimited stamina for chanting Hare Krishna. And Vyasaki has devoted a series of books called Radha Damodar Vilas, dealing with his story in detail. And he started to lead a party of young devotees in America on a bus with his deities of Radha Damodar, and they would go around and do kirtan. And it was called the Radha Damodar Party. And it went through different phases. And the early days, they had devotees. It was very attractive. The devotees wanted to go. Some of the devotees that I've met that were connected to that say that was the best time of their Krishna conscious career journey, was at the early time of the Radha Damodar party, traveling with Vishnu Jhan and going to places, colleges, places where tourists would come, put up beautiful, colorful things and sit and just do beautiful kirtan and distribute some prasadam. And it wasn't really hardcore or hard sell, even though people were selling literature, but it was quite mellow. But that was going to kind of change and kind of develop in the next year. And in America, they had this farm community that they bought in West Virginia called New Vrindavan, that was headed by Kirtanananda Swami, the very early devotee from New York, one of the early first sannyasis, and his friend Hayagriva, and they'd been very close friends before they joined Iskcon. Anyway, there was a long story going to happen with that, which turns into one of the worst kind of stories that was going to develop in the Krishna story. But around the world, different characters and personalities were developing, getting entrenched into the fabric of the Iskcon society as it gradually developed, because there was only so much focus that Prabhupada could give on anything. And a lot of the time, it was all going on without his immediate focus of attention. Okay, there you go. You've got a little bit of an idea about where it's gone. We're just kind of passing 75. We're going to go into 76 shortly. And that's where I'm going to start off to, if not tomorrow, then the day after or the day after that. I might take a break. I will let everybody know tomorrow earlier on in the day if I'm going to be giving a share. Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to do another song. What am I going to do? Don't know what to do. You know what? I don't think I am going to do a song today. I think I've done enough, really. I'm feeling I need to have a break. So sorry about that. Prematurely, I thought I'd do a song tonight, and I normally do at the end, but not today. So look, lovely folks out there, take care, whatever's going on, and keep yourselves absorbed, keep your minds out of fear, out of anxiety, and protect your spiritual autonomy. Hare Bol.